I didn't come to the county surplus auction looking for ghosts. I came for square footage, the kind you can scrub clean and rent cheap. But the ghosts were waiting anyway, in the mildew, in the draft that sighed through the courthouse vent, in the clerk's careful silence when he slid the deed packet across the counter. The Rosebridge Orphanage hadn't sold in 40 years. Nobody wanted it. The roof sagged like an old man's back. The yard was a rumor of weeds and brick dust, and every window carried a faint cross of masking tape from the last hurricane warning that never came. When the bidding hit 800 and stopped, I raised my hand. At 1800, the auctioneer blinked like I'd spoken in tongues. Sold, he said. To the woman with more optimism than sense. He wasn't wrong. The clerk's alcove smelled like dust, old toner, and fluorescent hum. Noah Park, County Records Division, name tag, tucked shirt, nervous energy. He stacked the manila folders between us, tapping each with a librarian's precision. This, he said, is your deed. And this, he nudged a brittle paper stapled at a crooked angle, is an annex no one's opened in a while. Handle carefully. The annex crinkled like onion skin, each word half a century deep into fading. My name, written in ballpoint ink across the transfer page, looked almost disrespectful against the copperplate signatures from 1908. There, under a row of legalese, a sentence leaned like a whisper trying to survive. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. If said orphanage be operated for 30 consecutive days serving children in need, all real property described herein shall revert to the Rosebridge Board of Trustees. I read it twice, then a third time, because sometimes comprehension arrives in waves. Slow, rising, irreversible, revert. I said. Noah adjusted his glasses. Technically a reversion clause. If the institution resumes its charter purpose, the original trust activates. Trust meaning... He hesitated. Meaning 3 downtown parcels that used to belong to the orphanage endowment. I'd need to check the valuation, but we're not talking pocket change. He left to fetch a valuation report. I sat in the humming alcove, trying to picture those parcels. Brick facades along Main, now bearing the names of Ashbury's most generous benefactors. Victor Kane's company logo glared from one corner like a second sun. Reverend Caldwell's Church Outreach Center occupied another. Together, they formed the polite machinery that ran this town's charity and its silence. When Noah returned, his face said he'd done the math, roughly 12 million current market. The air between us got heavy. He pushed his glasses up again, as if clarity could hide behind manners. You're joking, I said. I don't joke about archival records, he said, and the corner of his mouth twitched. Just barely. 2 hours later, I was standing in the orphanage's front hall, filming a shaky intro on my phone. Paint peeled in vertical strips like slow tears. The air tasted of plaster and river damp. Hey everyone, I said to the screen. Addison Cole here. Yes, I might have lost my mind. Welcome to Rosebridge. Bought at county auction for $1,800 and one rapidly escalating series of questions. A pigeon flapped out from a chandelier skeleton above me. Perfect opening shot. The tour moved from the foyer through the dormitory wings. Rows of iron beds still bolted to the floor, sunlight cutting dust into stripes. In the chapel, a pump organ crouched like a relic refusing to die. Its keys were ivory, yellowed, uneven. When I tried the drawer beneath the keyboard, it pulled an inch and stopped. Jammed by something unseen. The echo swallowed my voice. Behind me, a scuffling sound, then a bark. The dog was a mottled mutt, ribs visible under patchy fur, eyes bright with the kind of confidence only strays carry. He stood in the doorway like a volunteer late to shift. Well, hello, I said. He wagged once, decisive, and padded in, as if the deed had his name on it too. That night I sat on the orphanage steps with takeout coffee gone lukewarm, scrolling through the scanned annex Noah had emailed. The clause wasn't a metaphor. If Rosebridge served children for 30 consecutive days, the ownership of those parcels would transfer, not to me, but to the orphanage board. Once reconstituted, meaning I'd just bought the key to $12 million worth of contested history, meaning people who thought they'd buried something a century ago were about to feel the dirt shift. Glanced at the building's dark windows. Somewhere inside, the pump organ held its breath, drawer still half open. The dog lay at my feet, paws twitching in sleep. "What do you think?" I asked him. 30 days? Kids in need? I don't even have running water." He yawned, unimpressed. The streetlights along River Avenue buzzed like tired wasps. Across the river, downtown gleamed. Glass towers grafted onto old brick, the kind of renovation that erases memory by polishing it too bright. Rosebridge sat opposite like the town's unspoken conscience. I opened my laptop and typed a short post, 30 days. 10 beds. Help me make this legal. Then I hit upload. Morning brought voices at the fence. A delivery van idled, its driver squinting at a clipboard. "You Addison?" "Last I checked." He handed me a rolled blueprint tube. "Return address, county archives." Inside, a note in tidy handwriting. "Thought you might want the original charter copy." The parchment smelled faintly of candle wax. The ink bled where someone's hand had trembled. Article Key 4 described the mission: to provide temporary shelter and moral instruction for destitute or orphaned children of Ashbury County. 30 days. I said it aloud, testing the weight of the words. Somewhere behind me, a floorboard creaked. The dog, Button, I'd decided, sniffed at a patch of loose wood in the chapel, then barked once sharp. I knelt, pressing against the plank. It shifted a fraction, revealing dust and a sliver of something metallic below. Not tonight, I thought. Not yet. By late afternoon, the town had noticed me. The local paper ran a half-sarcastic blurb. "Former foster kid buys orphanage. Plans, pop-up community center." They quoted my post and ended with, "Sources say the building lacks heat. Plumbing and sanity." I laughed, then didn't. Noah called after hours, voice low, conspiratorial. "You didn't hear this from me, but that annex? It was misfiled under cemetery maintenance. Somebody wanted it buried in the literal sense. Who? Records don't say. But the cross-reference signature matches a 1934 memo about temporary custodianship of downtown parcels. You're stirring old sediment, Addison. I just wanted a roof, I said. Then you picked the wrong ghost. That night I set up camp in the caretaker's office, sleeping bag, flashlight, thermos. The radiator clanked twice, trying to remember warmth. Outside, rain whispered against boarded windows. Button dozed by the door. I wrote in my notebook, "If this place runs for 30 days, truth moves back into daylight." The idea sounded impossible and necessary at once, like a dare written by the dead. When the thunder rolled across the river, I swear I heard the organ answer, one low note vibrating through the floorboards. Too steady to be the wind. I pressed my hand to the wall. "Okay," I whispered. "We'll start small. Breakfast, paperwork, maybe ghosts later." Button lifted his head. Tail thumping once in agreement, and in that silent building, with its cracked ceilings and half-buried secrets, I felt the first pulse of something that wasn't quite fear and wasn't quite faith, the kind of feeling that says the ground beneath you is about to shift. By morning, Ashbury had opinions. Half the town thought I was running a scam. The other half thought I was the scam. The newspaper headline didn't help. "Woman buys haunted orphanage. Calls it a community project." The doorbell, an actual brass bell wired to nothing, jangled at 9:04 a.m. The man who stepped through could have been carved from a boardroom brochure. Polished shoes, river grey suit, smile calibrated for press releases. "Addison Cole?" he asked, offering a hand like a contract. "Victor Kane, River and Rail Holdings. I manage a few downtown properties connected to the old Rosebridge Trust." There it was, connected. The word did too much work. He walked the perimeter of the foyer as if assessing a liability claim, eyes noting every crack. "I heard you made quite the purchase." "I admire initiative. Most people wouldn't touch this place with a hazmat suit." "I'm not most people," I said. "So I've read." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Our firm's position is simple. The parcels you may have seen referenced in that dusty annex are complicated. They've been under active philanthropic management for decades. We'd hate to see a misunderstanding cause embarrassment for everyone involved, everyone meaning." Ashbury, he said smoothly. The foundations, the church, the donors, you. He reached into his portfolio and slid across a crisp envelope. Inside, an offer. $200,000 for the property, payable immediately. A buyout generous enough to feel insulting. That's a lot of zeros for a building you called a hazard, I said. Consider it goodwill. He buttoned his coat. A soft landing. Sometimes history is best left dignified in silence. Sometimes silence costs too much, I said, his gaze sharpened. Ms. Cole, I'd hate for you to encounter administrative obstacles. This building's insurance lapsed in 2009. Fire code violations alone could shut you down before you start. Are you threatening me or advising me? He smiled again. In Ashbury, that's often the same thing. He left the smell of expensive cologne and inevitability behind him. I stood staring at the envelope until Button sneezed on it, which felt like commentary. By noon, a different kind of visitor arrived, Reverend Miriam Caldwell. She carried her authority like perfume, present before she even spoke. Addison, she said warmly, I watched your video. Brave of you to take this on, but perhaps misguided. She clasped my hands in hers, all gentle pressure and rehearsed empathy. You know, our church runs an outreach for displaced families. We'd be honored to partner with you. We can host children in our fellowship hall, safe, inspected, insured. That way, you can still fulfill the spirit of the clause without putting anyone in harm's way. The spirit of the clause. The phrase glittered like a trap. So I give you the kids, I said, and you give me... What, a gold star? A clean conscience, she replied. And stability for Ashbury. Stability's usually code for don't ask questions. Her fingers tightened. This town remembers what happens when outsiders stir old pain. Please, let us help you redirect this energy toward something positive. I smiled. You mean quiet? Her eyes flickered just once. Quiet can be holy, Ms. Cole. Not if it buries people. She left with a blessing that sounded suspiciously like a warning. That evening I called Rosa Martinez. Her voice came through the line like steadiness itself. You really bought it? She asked. I did. And I think I just picked a fight with God and the Chamber of Commerce in the same afternoon. Then you'll need paperwork, she said. Licensing, food service permits, background checks, staff logs. If you want to keep this place open 30 days, it has to be bulletproof. No wiggle room for the city or the developers. You think they'll actually come after us? She laughed softly. They'll come with smiles first, then paperwork, then fire inspectors. I looked around at the peeling walls, the organ still brooding in the chapel, the stray dog chasing dust motes. So we build something real, I said. Something they can't call a stunt. Exactly. You do the work. I'll help. I posted a new video that night. Rosebridge Project Day 0. We open in 10 days. Volunteers, supplies, cooks, teachers, come prove this town still has a heart. The comment section caught fire. Half cheers, half warnings. 3 hours later, an anonymous email landed in my inbox. Subject line, friendly heads up. You'll never pass inspection. Don't waste your 30 days. Attached was a scanned complaint form, already filed with the city. Fire egress violations. No occupancy certificate. Unsafe structure. Button barked at nothing, tail rigid. Like he sensed the message humming through the wires. I closed the laptop and whispered to him. Guess we just got our first test. He tilted his head, eyes steady. Outside, lightning flickered over the river, and for the briefest moment, I could see the reflection of downtown's towers in the rain-slick street, each one funded by the same trust I'd just tripped awake. Victor Kane had offered me silence. Reverend Caldwell had offered sanctified surrender. I'd accepted neither. Tomorrow we'd start Rosa's checklist, permits, safety plans, the real grind, because the only way to fight a smiling no is with relentless yes, and the first yes starts at dawn. Dawn came as a checklist. Rosa arrived with coffee and a binder that could block a doorway. If we do this right, she said, handing me a highlighter, they can throw the entire municipal code at us, and it'll bounce. Her binder tabs read like a survival prayer. temp occupancy. Food handler, fire egress, volunteers, incident logs. Insurance quote, contingent. We took the building one violation at a time. Volunteers, half-retired tradespeople, half college kids who'd once eaten in the church basement, materialized by noon. Cots assembled with the satisfying clack of solvable problems. A retired plumber named Ida bled the radiators until they stopped groaning, then stared down a century-old shut-off valve like a duel at high noon. "You'll behave," she informed the pipe. It did. At 3:17 p.m., the first anonymous complaint hit, hot water temperature non-compliant. Rosa didn't blink. Turn the mixer valves to 120. Tag the water heaters. Photographed the gauge. We logged it with date and time, initialed like we were notarizing reality. By evening, a second complaint. Fire extinguishers allegedly expired. Jonah, the local podcaster who'd been circling like a curious crow, showed up with his recorder and a sheepish grin. "My audience wants to see the work, not rumors," he said. Rosa pointed him at the extinguisher wall. "Film the tags," she told him. "New as of this morning," he filmed. He also carried a box of headlamps and granola bars, which qualified him as useful. We trained volunteers in pairs, de-escalation, bedtime rules, allergies. I ran scripts aloud until my throat felt sanded. "We are a safe temporary program," I repeated like a spell. "We are not a shelter of last resort, but we will not turn you away without a plan." Rosa corrected my phrasing 3 times and then smiled. "There. Now it's bulletproof." The kids arrived in 1s and 2s and then 5 at once. 3 siblings for respite. 2 boys with identical wary eyebrows and a 6-year-old with a glitter unicorn backpack. That had seen better revolutions. A 12-year-old day placement who refused to give a last name and clearly had 6. A teenage volunteer named Deshaun Carter, who showed up in a jacket 1 size too thin and announced, "I can cook. I won't talk back to grown-ups unless they deserve it. And I will absolutely tell you if the chili needs salt. Do you always introduce yourself like a charge sheet?" I asked. He grinned. "Only when I want the job." Rosa eyed him, then flipped to a blank intake form. "Food handler card?" "I can get one." "Then wash your hands. Stainless bowl hairnet. You're on carrot duty for now." He saluted and meant it. 10 minutes later, he was showing the unicorn backpack kid how to hold a knife properly without bleeding. He kept up a steady patter about spices and knife angles and how adults pretend not to like cartoons. The little one's shoulders lowered by degrees. The building learned us back. Pipes stopped hissing like a mood. Windows accepted new weather stripping without a tantrum. Button trotted through every room as if he were drawing a patrol map. He had opinions about squeaky hinges and was deeply opposed to the vacuum cleaner. At night, I filmed the quiet, kids coloring under clip-on lamps, volunteers reading from battered paperbacks, Rosa filling out logs with the patience of a saint who files paperwork. I talked into my phone like a confessional. "Exhaustion is a shape," I said. "It fits perfectly over your bones and then asks for rent." The comment section argued over whether I looked brave or stupid. "The algorithm loves a woman who won't quit. It also loves a woman it can predict will fail." I declined to feed either appetite. We hosted the Tuesday night quilting circle to sew comforters for the dorms. Mrs. Yunji Park arrived with a tin of almond cookies and a thimble that looked like a family heirloom. Her posture said precision. At her elbow, Ethel Granger, 96 and sharper than cold glass, moved with small, deliberate steps, her lips pressed thin in polite skepticism. "We brought the old Rosebridge quilt," Yunji said, unfolding a faded patchwork from a tote. "Ethel thought you should see this." The quilt carried wear like a memory, indigo triangles, calico squares, 1 row of odd stitches that tugged the eye. The backing fabric had been pieced from flour sacks, Humboldt Mill ghosted across a corner. Ethel smoothed a palm over a seam like she was greeting an old friend. Matron said, "Sew the truth where no one out loud could see it," Ethel murmured. "Count the stitches," she told me. "Count them, and remember." Noah appeared from the records office with a notebook, and his particular way of looking like the rules had just invited him to a party. He crouched, eyes tracking the irregularities. The long-run stitches. The spacing's not consistent. That's because they're numbers, Yunji said, pleased. See, 3 long, 2 short, 5 long, 1 short. Not a girl's hand wobble. A deliberate pattern. We counted out loud. Yunji calling the runs, Noah translating them into page numbers. Each sequence landed near a yearly ledger page he'd already catalogued. The excitement in the room changed caliber. No longer a cozy craft night, but a tiny lab humming over a live wire. Page 190, line 8, Noah said, finger-tapping. That's a deposit-marked temporary custodianship, 1932. Ethel nodded once, eyes bright. They came with clipboards and said they would keep things safe until the depression eased. I was 15. I stitched all night while matron prayed. She said, if they come back, we must have the map inside the blanket. I felt my breath get shallow. The quilt was an index, the ledger the book, and our hands the unsealers of an old pact. Okay, I said, voice steadier than my lungs. Let's pull the ledgers this points to. Noah jogged to the small reading room we'd converted from a storage closet and returned with a hymnal that looked like it had been through multiple tent revivals. He frowned, pinching the spine. This is too tight for the print run. He opened it carefully, and the binding protested with a papery sigh. Something thin and brittle lived under the end paper. Noah slid a microspatula. Where had he even gotten a microspatula? Between layers and lifted out a strip no wider than 2 fingers. Ledger paper, translucent, ink faded but legible. We bent over it like conspirators. Names, amounts, dates. A phrase repeated, temporary custodianship pending audit. And a note in a crabbed hand. Wire record of Alderman's statement, kept with the chapel organ. The organ hummed at the back of my mind like a held note. Ethel's voice went small and fierce. Matron told me, if auditors come, show only the quilt. If crooks come, show them the door. She didn't live long enough to see either. The room adjusted around the weight of what sat in my palm. We weren't just playing detective for internet points. People had hidden this, because the truth could not survive in daylight without a plan for its care. I looked at Rosa. She held my gaze and nodded as if to say, hold it, but don't let it burn you. We photocopied the strip on the machine Jonah had hauled over for transparency, slid the original into a mylar sleeve, and tucked it in a locking document box. Noah labeled it in neat block letters. Ethel watched every movement like a hawk guarding fledglings. That night, when the quilting circle had dwindled to goodbyes and folded chairs, Button began scratching at a spot in the chapel floorboards near the pump organ. His nails made a sound like a match thinking about becoming flame. The headlamp skated over the wood, finding a hairline gap where the plank didn't sit flush. I pressed my palm to the seam. The board shifted a breath. Beneath, cold air rose, carrying a metallic tang. Tomorrow, Rosa said softly. We've done enough for one day, she was right. We logged the discovery, time, location, witnesses. We also logged the second anonymous complaint that had arrived during quilting, unlicensed food service. Dash read it over my shoulder and snorted. Joke's on them. I passed the food handler exam on my phone at lunch. Show me the certificate, Rosa said. He pulled it up, beaming like a lighthouse. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Print, sign, laminate, she ordered. He saluted again and sprinted to the office printer. I stepped back into the chapel, the organ hulking like a patient animal at rest, the quilt folded on a pew, the hymn book, lighter now, closed with its secret confessed. The building felt not lighter exactly, but truer, as if some internal bracing had finally slotted into place. I turned off the headlamp. The darkness held. From the dorm wing, quiet breathing and an occasional whisper drifted, kids negotiating the terms of sleep. Rosa's pen scratched in the office. Noah's keyboard clacked gently as he wrote the chain of custody. Ethel hummed a tune I didn't recognize, something older than the town. 30 days is a span you can count. But on day 3, it already felt like a covenant. We would over-prepare. We would out-document. We would make a home from the bones of a legend. And if the past refused to stay hidden, we would give it a room of its own and a nameplate on the door. Button lay down by the organ, front paws crossed like a sentry. Tomorrow, I told him, we open the floor. Night fell heavy over Rosebridge, the kind of dark that seemed to press its face against the windows, listening. The chapel lights hummed low, pooling amber over the quilting circle, as if the building itself leaned in to watch. We gathered around the quilt again, me, Noah, Rosa, Mrs. Yunji Park, and Ethel Granger, who sat upright in her folding chair like a general commanding a map. The fabric lay across the communion rail, a mosaic of color dulled by time, but glowing faintly under the lamps. Same pattern, Yunji murmured, fingertip following the zigzag row of uneven stitches. 3 long, 2 short. The cipher isn't decorative, it's numeric. Noah had a yellow legal pad open, pencil ready. He looked every bit the scholar of dust and secrets. Let's read them as page and line references again. Ethel, you remember the matron saying, she said, if ever they come to count what's missing, we'll give them the numbers they buried. Ethel's voice trembled only slightly. I never knew what she meant until now. The counting began. Unji called each cluster. Noah muttered page numbers under his breath. The rhythmic whisper of thread and pencil filled the chapel. It sounded like the heartbeat of the building returning. Page 190, line 8, Noah said at last, flipping through a binder of digitized ledgers. That's 1932. Notation says, transfer to temporary custodianship pending review. Transfer of what? I asked. Of 3 downtown parcels, Main, Riverside, and Depot lots. The air seemed to thin. Ethel's eyes went glassy. That's when the aldermen came. They said they'd keep the endowment safe till the banks recovered. Matron argued, but no one listened. They told her a woman had no head for finance. She pressed a gnarled hand over a patch of blue cloth, thumb tracing the frayed edge. She cried sewing this one. Said the Lord records truth in quiet ways. I suppose she was right. Noah turned the ledger sideways, studying an annotation in brown ink. Addison, look. It says, statement on record, organ, chapel. I looked toward the pump organ shadowed at the far end. The thing seemed to breathe with the flicker of the lights, bellows sighing faintly as the air shifted. That organ, Ethel whispered. Matron had the alderman play hymns after he signed the papers. He left muttering about conscience and God's ledger. 2 nights later, she locked the chapel and told me not to let anyone touch the instrument again. My pulse ticked faster. You think there's something inside it? Ethel nodded once. She said, the voice of their guilt will live where their hymns can't drown it. I thought she meant metaphor. Noah was already moving, dragging a flashlight from his satchel. The beam cut through the dark. Let's find out. The organ keys were cold, smooth, each one holding the faint oil of 1,000 forgotten hands. I pressed one, middle C, and a ghost of a note sighed out. Somewhere deep in the wood, something rattled faintly, metallic against hollow space. There's a drawer, I said, tugging at the lower panel. It slid an inch, then jammed. Rosa knelt beside me, braced her shoulder and pulled. The drawer came free with a dry groan, spilling a drift of old hymn sheets. Noah swept his light across the cavity. Wait, there's something behind the brace. He reached in with delicate fingers and withdrew a wrapped bundle the size of a loaf of bread, the cloth grey with dust and time. Yunji covered her mouth. Ethel whispered, "Oh, matron!" The bundle was tied with a ribbon that had once been blue. Inside, beneath the brittle fabric, lay a thin wire coiled around a small steel spool. The label was faded but legible under the dust. Rosebridge, November 1932. Noah breathed the words like a prayer. It's a wire recording, Rosa frowned. Like an early tape? Earlier, pre-magnetic tape. Dictaphone style used before acetate discs. They recorded minutes, testimonies, confessions. Ethel's fingers hovered over the spool but didn't touch. The alderman's statement. She must have hidden it before they came for her records. I felt something heavy and electric settle in my chest, reverence, fear, and duty, mixing like weather fronts. This isn't just proof. It's someone's conscience, bottled in metal. The chapel stayed silent long enough to hear Button's nails clicking on the stone aisle. He sniffed the spool, sneezed, and sat back like he'd fulfilled his sacred role. Rosa exhaled. "We'll need a way to play it." "I know someone," Noah said. "A collector who restores antique recorders for museums. Jonah," I said immediately. "He'll film the whole thing before you can say ethics violation." "He might be exactly what we need," Rosa countered. "Public eyes are protection now," Ethel nodded slowly. "The truth needs witnesses, not whispers." Later, after the others left, I sat in the chapel alone, the wire spool on the table beside a single candle. The flicker threw faint reflections along the metallic loops, tiny rings of captured sound waiting for air. I thought about matrons sewing her code into cloth while men with pens rewrote her work into their own ledgers. About the children she'd fed, whose names vanished into archives marked placement completed. About the silence that had protected the powerful for 90 years. I opened my notebook and wrote, "Evidence is not revenge." Its memory made visible. The words felt too clean for what was coming. But they steadied my hand. From the office, the sound of Rosa's typing drifted. Incident logs. Intake forms, the mundane backbone of legitimacy. From the dorm wing, a soft cough, then Dash's voice murmuring, "Go back to sleep." "Kid." The world was still functioning, still fragile. Button padded in and curled under the pew beside me. Sighing, I held the spool up to the candlelight, the faint shimmer tracing across my fingers. Inside those loops, a man's voice had waited almost a century to be heard. I wondered if he'd confessed out of guilt or pride, if he thought anyone would ever listen, if he realized that hiding the truth inside music was both genius and curse. The organ behind me creaked, wood expanding with the cool night air. It sounded almost like breath. I whispered, "Tomorrow, we find your voice." The flame bent, guttered, and steadied again, like a nod from the past. By the time I closed up, the clock had slipped past midnight. Outside, the rain had begun, soft as forgiveness. I locked the chapel, tucked the spool into the safe we'd repurposed from the donation box, and signed the custody log. On my way out, I caught my reflection in a broken pane, eyes ringed with exhaustion, mouth set in something between resolve and prayer. 30 days. Day 5, technically. 25 left to survive, to prove, to listen. Behind me, in the dark chapel, the organ's last note seemed to linger, one hollow breath of sound, waiting for the rest of its story to begin. Rain pinned the night flat against the orphanage windows. The gutters overflowed, making a curtain of water that blurred the streetlights into smeared halos. I was cataloguing intake files when Button's ears pricked. A soft engine idled somewhere beyond the gate, a low, steady hum that didn't belong to the storm. I killed the desk lamp. The rain hissed louder in the dark. Then from the iron gate a whisper, "Addison?" It was barely a sound, a voice made of fear. I stepped out onto the porch, pulling the hood of my sweatshirt up. The figure beyond the gate was soaked through, clutching a satchel under one arm. When the lightning flashed, I saw her face, Abigail Pike, the foundation accountant. The woman Victor Kane had once called our most reliable bean counter. "Abby?" I said. "What are you doing here?" She glanced over her shoulder. "They're watching the lot." Her voice trembled. "I can't stay long." The idling engine across the street flared headlights once, then went dark. I caught the outline of a dark SUV. Someone was definitely watching. "Come inside," I urged. She shook her head. "No, I can't be seen with you. Just listen." She slid a plastic folder through the bars. It was damp, but sealed tight. Inside, I glimpsed ledgers, donor lists, and wire transfers spiderwebbing across decades. "I copied the ledgers before they locked them down," she whispered. "Off-book transfers. Endowment money laundered through shell philanthropies. It's all tied to those downtown parcels." "How tied?" Her eyes darted toward the SUV. "Completely. The parcels fund everything. Campaigns, scholarships, property flips. The board calls it stewardship. The numbers call it theft." My pulse thudded in my ears. "You realize what this means?" "Yes." Her mouth trembled into something like a smile. "It means I'm unemployed by sunrise." Lightning cracked. For a heartbeat, the rain became white glass. In that flash, I saw the SUV driver's face. Theo Black, Victor's security chief. His silhouette was carved from vigilance, not malice. Our eyes met, and he raised a single finger to his lips. "Who's in the car?" I whispered. "His name's Theo," Abby said. "He's supposed to be making sure you don't talk to people like me. Then why hasn't he stopped you?" "I think he's deciding which side he's on." She pressed the satchel through the bars next. It was heavier than it looked. "There's more. Meeting minutes, donor names, the payment trail. If the reversion clause triggers, this is the evidence that proves motive. Without it, they'll claim ignorance." "Why me?" I asked. "Why not the police?" "Because the police get donations too," she said, rain streaking her cheeks like tears. "Because you already have the clause, the building, and the kids. You're the only one who can't be discredited without collateral damage." I tried to hand her an umbrella, but she refused. "Keep it," she said. "I need to look like I was never here." The SUV headlights blinked once, as if signaling the end of grace. Abby flinched. "Go," I said. She nodded. "Addison, one more thing." She leaned closer to the gate, voice thin as wire. "The 30 days terrify them. They've kept this machine running for a century. And you're the first person who found the off switch." Then she vanished into the rain, swallowed by shadow. Inside, I locked the door and peeled open the folder under the desk lamp. The papers were meticulous, ledger columns annotated in neat fountain pen, checks to dummy organizations with names like Ashbury Heritage Trust and Children's Future Fund, each line a siphon, each signature a confession in cursive. At the bottom of one page, a scrawled notation, "Containment plan, approved if necessary." My phone buzzed. Unknown number. One-word text, "Watch Theo." I went cold. Outside, the SUV engine started, idled a few seconds, then rolled away down River Avenue, tires whispering against the wet pavement. I recorded a quick video diary on my phone, voice shaking but steady enough to use later if I had to. "Day 6, I said. "Received documents proving the downtown parcels fund an illegal siphon. Source fears retaliation. Security detail possibly compromised, possibly conflicted. Feeling scared, yes, but certain. The only way out is through." I stared into the lens, rain still beading down my hood. "If anything happens to me, this story doesn't die here. It goes out with the morning upload." Button nudged my ankle, whined softly. I reached down to scratch behind his ears. "Yeah," I whispered, "I know. We're in it now." I made 3 copies of Abby's files, one for digital backup, one sealed in a metal tin under the floorboard by the pump organ, and one mailed to a journalist friend under a neutral return address. By the time I finished, it was nearly 3 a.m. The building was asleep except for the rain and the occasional creak of settling timber. I sat at the desk, staring at the glowing cursor on my laptop, when the smoke alarm screamed. I leapt up, heart slamming, scanning for flames, but the kitchen was dark. The smell hit next, sharp chemical wrong. "Rosa!" I shouted, racing for the hallway. Doors opened, children stirring, Dash blinking sleep from his eyes. "Evacuate!" I yelled. "Outside, now!" Button barked once, sharp as a siren, and bolted toward the storage wing, where the smell thickened into gasoline. Through the rain, I herded the kids toward the curb, shouting counts. 6, 7, 8. While Rosa grabbed the emergency roster and led the line. Behind me, fire licked blue through a doorway. Someone had poured accelerant and shut the sprinkler valve. Theo's text flashed again on my phone screen, lighting my wet hand. "Watch." And I understood. He hadn't threatened me. He'd warned me. Somewhere in the distance, sirens began to rise, answering the fire that someone else had tried to make permanent. The smell hit first. Burnt plastic and gasoline fighting for air. The hallway was a tunnel of flickering light, smoke curling like ink. Rosa was already ushering the kids toward the emergency exit, her voice calm and firm over the shriek of alarms. "This way, sweethearts, single file, hand on the shoulder in front of you. Don't look back." Dash clutched the unicorn backpack kid and ran, his face streaked with soot. Come on," he urged, herding them through the kitchen where Button barked frantically, teeth bared toward the storage closet that glowed orange around the seams. I grabbed the fire extinguisher off the wall, yanked the pin, and blasted foam at the doorframe. The hiss drowned everything else for a second, but it was no use. The door buckled, hinges shrieking. Someone had poured accelerant inside and closed it up tight. "Addison?" Rosa's voice cut through the noise. "Out now." I backed toward the exit, coughing. The sprinklers stayed stubbornly dry overhead. When I reached the stairwell, the truth clicked into place. The water valves had been shut, deliberately outside. The night was chaos, rain hissing on the roof, sirens winding closer. Kids clustered under the awning of the neighboring laundromat. Rosa counted them twice before letting herself breathe. Dash stood guard beside them, trembling but trying to look unshakable. That's when I saw the second car skid into the lot. Black sedan, headlights off, brakes screaming. Theo Black stepped out, rain hammering down on his jacket, fury written across his face. "Who told you to come?" I shouted over the wind. "Who do you think?" He barked, striding toward the orphanage. Victor wanted it contained, but I didn't think he'd... He stopped himself, jaw flexing hard. "Where are the kids?" "Safe," I said. "Mostly." "Good, stay here." Before I could stop him, Theo plunged inside. I chased after him anyway, instinct heavier than sense. The hall was a choking haze. He found the shut-off valve by feel, metal wrench already in his hand. When he twisted it open, the pipe screamed, and water burst through the overhead system in a sudden deluge. The fire hissed out in an instant, leaving behind steam and blackened walls. The sprinklers spat a final protest, then went quiet. Theo stood dripping, face lit by the red pulse of the emergency light. "I told him no," he said quietly. "No fire, no threats, just pressure." He didn't care. He turned toward me, eyes hollowed by something more than smoke. "You need to file a report. Tell them it was arson. Tell them you have proof who ordered it." "I'll need a statement," I said. "You'll get it." I'm done being his shield. Button trotted in from the chapel doorway, soaked but wagging, a dark shape clutched in his jaws. Theo frowned. "What's that?" The dog dropped it at my feet. Another piece of the orphanage's anatomy revealed by chaos. A warped wooden slat, pried loose from beneath the pump organ bench. Inside the hollow cavity, wrapped in cloth, was a second bundle. Rosa appeared, coughing, eyes watering. "Everyone's accounted for," she said hoarsely. "The firefighters are staging outside." Her gaze dropped to the bundle. "Please tell me that's not more bad news." I peeled the cloth away. Inside was another wire spool, smaller than the first, but labeled in the same neat hand. Rosebridge, Deek, 1932. Noah's voice echoed from behind me, half choked on smoke. "Another recording?" "Looks like it," I said. "Button found it," Rosa blinked. "That dog's going to end up on payroll." Theo's expression darkened as he studied the label. "Whatever's on that thing. It's why they wanted this building gone." Outside, the firefighters surged in, hoses and helmets filling the hall. One of them shouted questions, but the answers tangled together in the noise. Theo stayed by my side, arms crossed, drenched but steady. When they finally declared the fire out, Rosa and I stood in the rain, watching the smoke curl into nothing. The kids were shivering under blankets, blinking at the flashing lights. Dash held a paper cup of cocoa someone had conjured, jaw clenched tight. Theo walked over, voice low. "You need to tell the city inspector in the morning that this wasn't negligence. It was sabotage." "I will," I said. He hesitated, then pulled a small flash drive from his coat pocket. "Here, internal emails, work orders, camera logs, everything Victor sent me in the last month, proof." I took it carefully, feeling the weight of every unsentenced crime in that single inch of plastic. "Why give this to me?" "Because I've seen what happens when you follow bad orders too long," he said. "I won't watch kids burn again." The sirens began to fade as the last fire truck pulled away. Rosa turned to me. "We'll need somewhere to sleep tonight." I nodded toward the unscathed east wing. "Half the dorms are dry. We'll clean and move everyone in." She exhaled, relief and exhaustion braided together. 30 days, huh?" 24 left, I said. Dash wandered over, cocoa gone, voice small but sure. "We still open tomorrow?" "Yes," I said. "Especially tomorrow." He grinned through the soot. "Cool." Theo leaned against the gatepost, rain running down his face. "You realize he'll come after you harder now." I looked back at the orphanage. Blackened walls steaming, windows glowing faintly where the lights still worked. "Let him," I said. "The fire already told the town what kind of men they are. Now we show them what kind of people we can be." Button barked once, tail thumping. Rosa smiled faintly. "Guess that's our rally cry." I gathered the bundle, the flash drive, and my soaked notebook. The rain had eased to a whisper. The orphanage still stood, day 7 barely, and the war had already gone from legal to literal. But as we herded the kids back inside, I realized something strange. Every wall that survived the fire seemed cleaner, as if the smoke had peeled off years of silence. The truth, once lit, never really goes out. The morning after the fire, Ashbury's gossip mill hit fever pitch. News vans lined River Avenue, their antenna masts stabbing the fog. Reporters angled for sound bites about the orphanage blaze, while firefighters muttered to each other about cut sprinkler lines and accelerant residues. The official word was under investigation. Everyone else called it what it was: sabotage. Inside, the air smelled of smoke and lemon disinfectant. Rosa directed volunteers like a general running triage, replacing bedding, sealing off charred rooms, logging every safety repair with obsessive precision. Her clipboard had its own orbit. Theo stood near the door, still in yesterday's jacket, watching the scene like he wasn't sure he was allowed to belong here yet. "Insurance inspector's on her way," he said. "Victor's already spinning this as an electrical short." "Good," I said. "Let him lie first. It'll make the truth sting more." He almost smiled. "You talk like a soldier." "Maybe I'm just tired of civilians pretending their wars are paperwork." Rosa raised an eyebrow. "You two done posturing?" "Because we have a spool of history waiting." She was right. Noah had texted at dawn. Found a working Webster-Chicago wire recorder. "Jonah knows a guy. Bring the spool." So that afternoon, we carried the 1932 recording, carefully packed in foam, to the cluttered sanctuary Jonah Reed called a studio. It was part hardware graveyard, part caffeine temple. Wires coiled across tables, microphones blinked like tiny red eyes, and 3 coffee mugs fought for dominance on the mixing board. "Ladies and gentlemen," Jonah announced, sweeping back his hoodie like a magician, "welcome to the Museum of Obsolete Truth. Let's make ghosts talk." Noah handled the spool like glass, threading it onto the recorder's steel hub. "If the wire's oxidized, it might snap. Everyone, don't breathe loudly." Jonah grinned, flipping a toggle. "Recording at quarter speed. Speakers live." The machine whirred, a mechanical exhale, and then, through the static, a man's voice crackled into existence. Tinny, formal, trembling with guilt. November 14th, 1932. Statement of Alderman Charles H. Whitlow regarding the Rosebridge endowment transfer. The room went still. Even the hum of electronics seemed to fade. We did not intend theft, only stewardship, until the market righted itself. But the matron objected. She said we were taking the children's inheritance. I told her the papers were temporary, that the Lord would forgive necessity. A hitch of breath, then a scraping sound, as if he'd leaned closer to the microphone. "But they won't give it back. The deeds, the interest, everything is being siphoned. I fear what we've done will damn this town's soul long after we're gone." Jonah's hand hovered over the controls. "Holy," he caught himself whispering, "is this real?" "Hide this where hymns can't drown it," the voice finished. "If someone ever hears, tell them we meant to atone." The wire hissed into silence. No one spoke for several seconds. The machine ticked as it slowed to a stop. Rosa whispered, "That's a confession." Noah nodded, stunned. Authenticated by the model date, sound signature, and the embedded notary stamp audible in the background. "It's real." Jonah leaned back, running a hand over his face. "You realize if we release this, we're not just telling a story, we're detonating one." "That's the idea," I said quietly. He exhaled. "Then we do it right. I'll edit nothing. Just clean the audio for clarity. I'll schedule an embargo drop. Founders Day Gala, 8 p.m. Everyone important will be in one room, pretending they built this town." Noah looked at me. "We'll need legal grounding before then." I know exactly who to ask, I said. Judge Laurel Whitcomb lived in a narrow house that smelled faintly of ink and citrus. She answered the door in slippers and a gaze sharp enough to cut marble. Addison Cole, she said, the woman turning probate law into reality television. Come in. We played the confession for her on Jonah's portable rig. She listened without interruption, eyes narrowing by degrees. When it ended, she turned to me. That clause you found, she said, was my hill to die on in 1999. The city tried to dissolve Rosebridge's charter back then. I refused. They retired me early for the trouble. So it's enforceable? I asked. Absolutely. The reversion clause activates the moment the orphanage operates continuously for 30 days. The ownership transfers by operation of law. No council vote required, though they'll pretend otherwise. Her smile was dry and dangerous. You've got a powder keg, Miss Cole. Light it carefully. That night, I met Councilwoman Priya Nadar in a cafe downtown, neutral ground. She arrived precisely on time, tablet in hand, eyes wary. I slid a folder across the table. The deed, the annex, the confession. You can verify every piece. She didn't touch it yet. Victor says you're fabricating an inheritance scam. Then he should be the first to testify under oath. Her expression flickered. You really think you can run out the 30 days? I don't think, I said. I plan. Priya closed the folder. If this evidence holds, the council can't bury it. But you'd better be ready for the storm. Founders' Day is in 48 hours. That's when the city performs its myths, I smiled. Then let's interrupt the performance. When I got back to Rosebridge, the lights in the dorm wing glowed warm through the wet night. Dash was stirring a pot of soup big enough for an army, humming off key. The kids were safe, fed, alive. Rosa met me at the door. How bad is it? Bad enough to change everything, I said. Good enough to be worth it, she nodded. Then we're ready. Button trotted in from the hall, tail wagging, and dropped a chewed slipper at my feet. Theo's, from the doorway. Theo just shook his head. Dogs got better instincts than half the police force. I laughed for the first time in days. Let's hope he likes the sound of revolution. Outside, the church bells struck 9. The voice in the wire had spoken, and now the living had to answer. Ashbury dressed itself in false gold that night. The Founders' Day Gala was the kind of annual spectacle the town clung to. Half charity, half absolution. The Riverside Museum, all restored brick and glass skylights, shimmered under a banner that read, "A Century of Giving." I walked in with a press badge Jonah had forged and a stomach full of nerves. Inside, the chandeliers glowed like captive suns. Waiters drifted with trays of champagne. A string quartet soared polite music into the air, while the town's most decorated sinners congratulated each other for surviving another year untarnished. Victor Kane stood near the donor's wall, a portrait of composure in a black tuxedo and a smile polished to a weapon. He greeted officials with handshakes and careful laughter. Reverend Miriam Caldwell floated beside him, her collar gleaming, blessing the room with phrases like community continuity and shared stewardship. They were the perfect duet of menace and mercy. Jonah's voice crackled softly through the discreet earpiece he'd handed me an hour before. You're live on the comm, Addison. The embargo's ticking down. Clip goes public in 7 minutes. You sure you don't want a dramatic countdown? I want truth, not theater, I whispered. He chuckled. Truth is theater. You just don't get to direct the audience. Across the hall, Councilwoman Priya Nadar circulated with the grace of someone keeping 2 worlds from colliding. She saw me and gave a small, unreadable nod. The kind politicians use to say I'm listening, but you don't own me yet. I drifted toward the refreshment table, pretending to study a tray of miniature eclairs while scanning the room. Abby Pike stood by the far wall, pale but resolute, clutching a manila folder like a shield. Theo lingered near an exit, scanning for threats with the watchful stillness of someone who once did this for war. Ethel and Mrs. Yunji Park sat at a reserved table near the front, their quilt folded neatly in Ethel's lap, a silent exhibit of proof, and then there was the podium. Reverend Caldwell's voice rose above the hum of conversation. "We gather tonight to honor the founders whose vision built this city's heart," she proclaimed, "to reaffirm the trust that binds us as one family under grace." Applause spread like reflex. Victor stepped forward to add his flourish. "And to celebrate the stewardship that ensures Ashbury's prosperity continues for another 100 years. His smile never faltered. But his eyes found me across the crowd, a flicker of annoyance quickly buried under charm. He gestured to the podium. "And now, before our final presentation, Miss Caldwell will offer a prayer of gratitude." I moved. "Excuse me," I said, stepping through the tables. My voice wasn't loud, but it carried. "May I speak first?" Heads turned. Murmurs rippled like a dropped glass. Miriam smiled tightly. "Ms. Cole, this isn't the time. Actually, it's exactly the time," I said. "Because this gala is about gratitude, and I think the children of Rosebridge deserve to be thanked for lending you your reputation." 100 faces turned toward me, curiosity sharpening into unease. I held up the small recorder Jonah had given me, a retro microphone disguised as a clutch. "I've come with something borrowed from your archives," I said. "A voice you all forgot to invite tonight." Miriam's hand fluttered toward the mic. "Addison, please." The room went silent except for the faint ping of champagne glasses. On every phone in the audience, screens began to light up at once. The embargo had dropped. The alderman's voice from 1932 filled the hall, brittle and clear, over the sound system Jonah had quietly patched into. "We did not intend theft. Only stewardship until the market righted itself." The crowd froze. Words echoed against marble and glass. "We took what was meant for the children." Miriam's color drained. Victor's composure fractured like glass under frost. Someone gasped. A councilman swore. The quartet stopped mid-measure. Across the hall, Abby stepped forward, trembling but fierce. "The ledger entries match that confession," she said to the reporters who had already begun filming. "Every cent moved through their foundations." Theo approached Priya and whispered something low. She blanched, then nodded once, lips tightening. She turned to the mayor. "We're calling an emergency session at dawn." Victor regained enough breath to speak. "This is slander," he snapped, voice sharp enough to draw eyes. "These so-called recordings are fabrications. Do you have any idea what you've just done, Ms. Cole?" I met his gaze. "Yes, I stopped pretending silence was civic duty." Miriam stepped between us, trembling. "Victor, enough. This can't be ignored." He glared at her, realizing too late that the moral ground beneath them had split. Priya raised her phone toward the podium microphone. "The council will review the evidence publicly," she announced, her voice firm. "This town deserves transparency." Jonah's voice buzzed in my ear. "The clip's viral. Thousands of views already." "You just changed Ashbury's bedtime story." Victor turned away, jaw clenched, muttering something to his assistant. His mask had cracked, and the polite crowd watched him retreat like a man walking off stage before the final act. The rest of the gala dissolved into chaos, reporters swarming, donors whispering damage control, the string quartet awkwardly packing up. In the corner, Ethel unfolded the quilt across a table, its coded stitches gleaming under chandelier light. "They can't unsee it now," she said softly to me. "The truth has a body again." I looked around the fractured room, the founders' portraits glaring down at their own undoing, and felt neither triumph nor fear, only a strange, quiet clarity. Priya touched my arm as I turned to leave. "Be at City Hall at dawn," she said. "Bring everyone." "You'll have your hearing," I nodded. "Day 29, I said. Almost home. Outside, the rain had stopped. The air smelled like clean stone and endings. Behind me, through the museum's glass facade, the chandeliers kept shining, but the reflection in them had changed. For the first time in a century, Ashbury's mirror cracked, and what it showed was real. Morning came with the weight of reckoning. By the time the sun cleared the mill stacks, the front steps of City Hall were already packed. Reporters, townsfolk, former Rosebridge residents clutching faded photos, and donors who now kept their sunglasses on indoors. The marble columns looked taller than usual, as if the building itself had straightened its spine for judgment. Inside, The council chamber thrummed with a low, nervous electricity. Priya Nadar sat at the center dais, gavel before her, face set in a mask of deliberation that couldn't quite hide fatigue. Beside her, the mayor shifted papers like a man hoping to rearrange fate. When they called my name, I stood. My knees shook only until I saw the front row. Rosa, arms folded. Noah, clutching his binder. Theo in a pressed shirt, eyes clear. Abby pale but resolute. Dash sat beside Ethel, wearing his volunteer apron like a medal. Behind them, Buttons slept curled at Rosa's feet, oblivious to history and progress. I stepped to the microphone. Madam Chair, members of the council, I began, voice steadier than I felt. I'm Addison Cole, acting director of Rosebridge Orphanage. For 28 days, we've operated under the 1908 charter clause found in the property deed. We've provided housing, meals, tutoring, and medical access to children in need, verified by county inspectors, health services, and our own daily logs. The reversion clause states that after 30 consecutive days of operation, the 3 downtown parcels revert to the orphanage's board. A murmur rippled through the crowd. I continued, holding up a document. These are the annex pages, notarized in 1908 and again in 1932. You've all heard the confession recorded that year by Alderman Whitlow. You've seen the ledgers from the foundation, the quilt cipher, the hymn book ledger strip, the financial records Abby Pike recovered, and Theo Black's sworn statement regarding the arson attempt. This isn't a theory. It's the paper trail of a century of theft disguised as philanthropy. I handed the documents to the clerk. Noah rose next, methodical as ever. He explained the legal lineage of the orphanage's incorporation, the misfiled cemetery memo that had hidden it, and the untouched line in county code that made the clause still valid. Each reference landed like a nail in the coffin of the old order. Then came Rosa. She spoke plainly, listing permits, safety inspections, the food service license, the staffing logs. Her calm precision stripped every bureaucratic excuse from the opposition. Theo followed, shoulders squared. I was hired by Mr. Kane to monitor Ms. Cole and ensure compliance. When he ordered a containment fire to remove an obstacle, I refused. Someone else carried it out. I reopened the valves and filed the report you have before you. What I saw wasn't negligence. It was intent. The chamber went still. Abby stepped up, hands trembling as she held a thin folder. These ledgers are duplicates of the originals, she said. They show transfers from the endowment accounts to shell foundations controlled by the same 3 families since 1934. Every year, small amounts were funneled through heritage projects and redevelopment initiatives, the same ones funded by those downtown parcels. It's all there, line by line, reporters scribbled furiously. Then Reverend Miriam Caldwell rose from the audience, asking quietly to speak. Priya hesitated, then nodded. Miriam approached the podium like someone walking toward the truth for the first time. I believed, she began softly, that protecting the institutions meant protecting the people they served. I see now that I was wrong. Stability without truth is rot. I can't undo what my predecessors did, but I can use what remains of our charity's funds for restitution. The crowd shifted, unsure whether to applaud or weep. Finally, Dash stood. He hadn't been called to testify, but he didn't need permission. He walked up with the confidence of someone who'd carried children through smoke. His voice cracked once, then found its rhythm. I don't know much about laws, he said, but I know what home feels like. Rosebridge feels like it. The people up there, he pointed toward the dais. You talk about property and parcels, but to us it's about whether we matter enough to keep our own house. You can't fix history by hiding it. You fix it by feeding people who are still hungry because of it. Silence. The kind that feels like breath held by an entire town. Priya's eyes glistened as she adjusted the microphone. Thank you, Mr. Carter, she said. The council has heard enough. The members leaned in, whispered, passed papers down the line. After a long minute, Priya struck the gavel once. Based on the evidence presented, she said, and in accordance with the 1908 charter, the city of Ashbury recognizes the reversion clause as valid and enforceable. Upon verification of 30 consecutive days of compliant operation, tomorrow at 5 p.m., the downtown parcels will legally revert to the Rosebridge Board of Trustees. The room erupted. Some cheered. Others shouted objections. Victor, sitting stone-faced near the back, turned to leave. Cameras flashed as he brushed past reporters, jaw set. Miriam sat down, crying quietly into her folded hands. Abby reached for her, a strange grace passing between guilt and courage. Theo exhaled for the first time in hours. Rosa clutched my shoulder, whispering, "We did it." Not yet, I thought. One day remained. Priya rapped the gavel again. "This session is adjourned," she said. Then, looking directly at me, "Keep the doors open, Ms. Cole. You've earned the right to finish what you started." As the crowd spilled into the hall, Dash grinned up at me. "So tomorrow's it, huh?" "Tomorrow's it," I said, heart pounding. He held up his phone. "Jonah's already live-streaming this. The whole town's watching." Outside, the morning light burned off the last of the fog. Ashbury, for the first time in decades, looked honest, exposed, imperfect, real. We had 24 hours left to keep the promise. The 30th sunrise broke over Ashbury in muted gold, the kind of light that makes even soot look holy. The town was holding its breath, waiting to see if the orphanage would make it one more day. Inside Rosebridge, everything hummed with cautious routine. Breakfast trays rattled. Dash stirred an industrial pot of chili big enough to feed a courthouse. The kids worked on homework at the long table under Rosa's watchful eye. A new smoke detector blinked above the pantry door, Theo's handiwork. I moved through the halls with my clipboard and exhaustion, checking off inspection points for the final time. Every pipe gleamed with recent polish. Every outlet had a green tag of clearance. I had learned to see survival in paperwork. At noon, Noah appeared with a grin and a manila envelope. "County compliance, signed and sealed," he said. "They verified every safety upgrade. You're officially bulletproof." "Almost," I said, signing the form anyway. "Victor still has until 5 o'clock to find one more loophole." As if summoned by his name, the doorbell rang. Theo opened it, posture already defensive. Standing outside was a courier in a grey suit, holding a crisp folder stamped Superior Court of Ashbury County. Theo took it, flipped the seal, and swore under his breath. "It's an injunction," he said. "Filed at 9 a.m., judge assignment pending." I read the first line aloud. "Petitioner River and Rail Holdings, citing potential fraud in activation of historic charter clause." My stomach sank. "Of course. He's trying to freeze the transfer before 5. Rosa frowned. "Can he do that?" Theo's eyes flicked to the page. "Only if the judge signs off." Noah looked up. "Who's on rotation today?" I blinked. "Whitcomb." We exchanged looks. Then I said, "He's already lost." By 3 o'clock the courtroom was filled again. Judge Laurel Whitcomb sat like a monument behind her bench, glasses perched low. Victor Kane stood at the petitioner's table, all polished steel and artificial calm. His lawyer, a man who probably charged by the heartbeat, presented a stack of affidavits. "Your Honor," the lawyer began, "we request a temporary injunction to halt the charter reversion pending full review. There are concerns about authenticity, compliance, and—" Whitcomb held up a hand. "Counselor, I've read your motion. Unfortunately for your client, I wrote half the case law you're misquoting." A ripple of laughter broke from the gallery. Victor's jaw tightened. The judge turned to me. "Ms. Cole, do you wish to respond?" "Yes, Your Honor," I said, rising. "The charter clause is valid, the operation continuous, and the record overwhelming. The petition is simply a last-ditch effort to keep property that was never theirs." Whitcomb nodded once. "Well said." She signed a single line on the order, her pen cutting through decades of theft. Motion denied. "The reversion clause stands," Victor's lawyer sputtered, but Whitcomb's gavel came down with the finality of thunder. "Mr. Kane," she said, voice like tempered steel, "you and your predecessors have had a century to do the right thing. Consider yourselves lucky the law still allows restitution instead of retribution." Victor turned without another word and strode out, reporters swarming behind him like a tide. By 5 o'clock, the orphanage was alive again. The community had gathered outside, neighbors, teachers, journalists, and kids who'd once lived behind those walls. Priya Nadar arrived in a blazer the color of conviction, surrounded by council aides and a notary. She stood on the front steps, clipboard in hand, and read from the city's decision. As of this hour, October 16th, 5 p.m., the Rosebridge Orphanage Reversion Trust is hereby recognized and activated. The downtown parcels are transferred into public ownership under the Rosebridge Board of Trustees. Applause erupted, hesitant at first, then swelling into something enormous. Rosa squeezed my arm. "You did it." "No," I said softly. "We did." Cameras flashed as Priya signed the document. Theo stood nearby, providing quiet security, though now his posture looked more like protection than duty. Abby wept openly, the relief undoing weeks of fear. Judge Whitcomb appeared on the porch, still in her robe. "You've earned this," she said. "Guard it well." Ashbury's memory just became public record again. I nodded, voice catching. "Thank you, Judge, for everything." "You can thank me by never needing another hearing," she said dryly, but her eyes softened. When the noise subsided, I stepped up to the microphone. Reporters expected a victory speech. Instead, I pulled a folded list from my pocket. "These are the names of children once listed as unaccounted for in the Rosebridge records," I said. "They were here when the money vanished, when the buildings changed hands, when the town forgot them. Their stories will no longer be footnotes. I read each name aloud, one by one. Some in the crowd bowed their heads. Others wept quietly. When I finished, I turned to Reverend Caldwell. "Reverend," I said gently, "would you close us out with a benediction?" Her voice trembled but carried. "For truth uncovered, for hearts repaired, for names restored to their rightful place, may grace walk beside this house." Even the skeptics whispered amen. That evening, the new Rosebridge Archive was announced, a truth and repair center funded by restitution from the reclaimed parcels. Rosa was named interim director. Abby accepted a position as compliance officer. Theo, against his protests, was appointed head of security. Noah and Mrs. Yunji Park curated the quilts and documents for public display. Ethel, at last, slept without nightmares, her life's secret finally safe in daylight. Dash stirred his pot of chili, laughing with the younger kids. "Guess I'm feeding history tonight," he said. Button sat by the door, wearing a new collar that read, "Resident." Cameras caught him mid-bark in the press photo. The image went viral by sunset. I watched it all unfold and felt the strangest mixture of joy and sorrow. The old order had cracked, but the cost of truth lingered in the ruins. Charred beams, sleepless nights, ghosts finally named. As the sun dipped over the river, the windows of Rosebridge glowed like lanterns. For the first time, their light belonged to everyone. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch, and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.